What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today is another edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast, the show that is unscripted and unedited. And today we are looking at one of the cards from Kaldheim, a new spoiler card that just got released today that is pretty darn exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to give it a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel while you're there. It makes a huge difference. Also, if you are listening to this anywhere where you get your podcasts, please don't hesitate to give it a 5-star review, and go ahead and write a little review while you're there. It really helps share the word that the show's going on, and gives me some valuable feedback, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, with that, let's get into the episode. So today we are looking at Niko Aris, who is a planeswalker with starting loyalty of 3 with a casting cost X, white, blue, blue. So we have an Azorius planeswalker with X in its casting cost, which is pretty interesting. Like, that on its face right there is kind of intriguing. The other thing I find really interesting is that the X is not tied to the loyalty ability like we've seen with there was a Simic Nissa that I believe was in, I want to say Amonkhet, that had X in its casting cost, and X was its number of loyalty counters that it started with. But in this case, Niko Aris has 3 starting loyalty regardless of how much you spend X for. So let's find out what is the X. When Niko Aris enters the battlefield, create X shard tokens, and they are enchantments with, you can pay 2, sacrifice this enchantment, scry 1, then draw a card, which if you're, for those of you playing at home, that is opt. Basically, it's a little enchantment that you can sacrifice for 2 generic and you get to opt, which is pretty cool. That's just a really neat little ability, and you get the number of tokens equal to the X. So this works in a lot of different ways. One, they're enchantments. So anything that triggers off constellation. So, there's Archon of Sun's Grace, which comes to mind, which creates Pegasus creatures every time an enchantment enters the battlefield. That would trigger X number of times based off of Niko just coming onto the battlefield. So that's pretty cool. And then on top of that, with each one of those enchantments, you get to sacrifice them, scry 1, draw a card, which is just a really cool ability, and being able to add card advantage in that way is very useful later in the game. So anytime you have 2 mana left over, you can just turn it into a card, and you even have some selection over that card. That's really powerful. I feel like that it's one of those abilities that you read it and it doesn't seem super strong, but I can see this in practice really exploding and being very useful. The one thing is, most players are going to be tapping out to get Niko onto the battlefield on like turn 5 or 6, and get 2 or 3 shard tokens, in which case that does leave them open. So that is one situation. The control player never wants to tap out, and that's where I can see this. That's the one situation where I think it'd be far smarter in many cases to cast Niko down where X equals 1, on turn 6 or 7, so you have mana back to cast various counter spells. But that's regardless of how it's used, I think a lot of newer players are going to be tapping out. But what else? Here I'm just talking about the shard tokens. This is all just based on Niko's passive. We haven't even gotten into the loyalty abilities yet. +1, up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Whenever that creature deals damage this turn, return it to its owner's hand. I love that ability on a couple of different levels. So the first thing you see is, okay, the creature can't be blocked. You make a creature unblockable. That's really cool. However, you don't want to. The first thing that I want to do whenever I can create an unblockable creature is give my biggest, nastiest, most powerful threat that unblockable. Well, in this situation, you may not want to do that, because whenever the creature deals damage, you then return it to its owner's hand. So conversely, I do want to combine this with cards like Skyclave Apparition, where the card, when it enters the battlefield, you get to remove a threat with mana cost 4 or less from your opponent's board, and then when it leaves the battlefield, they get a token that's equal to it, with power and toughness equal to its mana cost. So with Skyclave Apparition, you could then effectively swing in, deal damage, which usually Skyclave Apparition, you don't put that in your deck to deal damage. But all of a sudden with Niko, it can. You then bounce it back up to your hand, you get to play it again. So you're kind of blinking it in its own way. So that has some really cool implications. Yeah, generally speaking, I like it a lot. Then what else? What else can Niko do? -1. Niko Aris deals 2 damage to target tapped creature for each card you've drawn this turn. So if you're drawing cards, that damage can really ramp up pretty darn fast, which is going to give your opponent pause for attacking you with creatures that don't have vigilance. Because let's be honest, you don't want to tap down a creature when you know your opponent has an answer for it right there on the board. And if you have 2 or 3 shard tokens, those can turn into individual cards very easily to fuel this -1 ability. So that's a really powerful piece of removal that is going to change the way your opponents look at their creatures and can change how they decide to attack, which is really useful. And really, that leads to some mind games at the table, which I really appreciate and really enjoy. Because if somebody has, say, a swift response, destroy target tapped creature, you don't know they have it. It's in their hand. That's an instant for 2 that can just kind of come out of nowhere and smack you and punish you for swinging. Now, with Niko, you would get the hit. You would get to swing in, you'd get combat would resolve and all that jazz. But the problem is, you get to see that they have that -1 on the other side of the battlefield. And so you are incentivized to not swing in. Anyway, and then there's one other -1 ability, which is create a shard token. So this creates additional shard tokens. So even if, you can play Niko down on turn 3 for white, blue, blue, get no additional shard tokens, and immediately create one. And so you would have a 2 mana or 2 loyalty Niko Aris with a shard token on the battlefield, and it only costs you 3 mana. That's not bad. That's not bad at all, actually. That's a pretty decent rate. And in the end, the shard tokens could be the main benefit that you're getting here. So you might actually just downtick Niko multiple times, get multiple shards, and accept that they're going to die, and that's okay. And if it takes one creature down on the way, cool. Or it can also help help you swing in for lethal by giving unblockable to the right threat at the right time. So I think Niko has a lot of versatility and is very, very good, frankly. I think this card's fantastic. And on top of that, they put a fantastic card to represent the first human non-binary planeswalker in Magic, which I think is really cool. And so there's this piece of representation, and it happens to be on a card that's also incredibly powerful. So it's just cool on a lot of levels. So all in all, I think Niko is a fantastic card. I really dig it. And also the aesthetic of Niko, the shard, there are these metallic like mirror shards that are around them seemingly at all times, which are clearly these shard tokens, and so thematically it all works. There's also a showcase frame variant that is just absolutely gorgeous, and the cool part about it is it's a borderless piece of art, and the shards have they're kind of a blue color with this purple aura about them, and they're floating all around Niko. And Niko actually has one in their hand, and it's holding it up in such a way that it actually overlaps with the title on the card, the title bar that has Niko's name, but it's over the bar and under the mana symbol, which is kind of a fun little visual trick. And so the X is almost highlighted by this shard, and it's especially cool because the X is what generates the shards. So thematically, they just nailed it. And I think that was probably a happy accident when they matched the art up with the frame, but I gotta say, it turned out really, really well. All in all, I think Niko's a phenomenal card and probably the most powerful planeswalker that's going to be in Kaldheim. I fully expect there to be blue-white control decks running this card in standard and probably historic within pretty short notice. So I'm excited to see it, and I'm interested to see if I'm right on that and where Niko ends up. So thank you so much for hanging out. This has been an absolute delight. You can catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/hamhawks42. I'm over there every weekday morning, 5:30 to 7:30 Eastern time. And don't forget, you are a good person and you deserve to be happy.